Hey, what's up, guys? This is Dr. Vic, and I'm excited that you're here listening to this episode as we're going to dive into a controversial topic. And I'm going to tell you right now, this thing has been heavily researched, and every year, I feel like it's every year to every other year, there's either something good about it or something bad about it. And I was having a couple conversations with patients in the last week or two about this, and I was kind of like, you know what? I'm going to do a podcast on this. It's been a long time. I want to at least create the guideline. And these are just some basic things that you can follow of what my criteria is when it comes to consuming the beverage called coffee. All right. We're going to dive into all about it. Some of you may get a little upset about this. Bear with me on it. I promise. I'm just looking out for your best interest at the end of the day. But before we do, check out all the information in our show notes. Make sure you subscribe and like our podcast, share a review. Is how it helps us get this information out there to really help elevate the consciousness of individuals from a health perspective and so much more. So coffee, first of all, should we drink it or should we not? It varies and it depends on the individual. It depends on what you have going on in your life. If you're really, really stressed out, probably not a good idea to have coffee right now. There are ways you can determine that. And if you stay to the end, I'm going to give you a bonus to answer that question. Should I drink coffee or not? Okay. But I'm not getting into this podcast is not about the aspects of the benefits of coffee. I'll have a note. If you guys like this, let me know. Send me an email, info@wellnesspathchiro.com. And I'll be more than happy to do a whole podcast of the benefits and the health benefits of coffee and why it's critically important to utilize. But for today, I want you to take a moment and really understand the differences here of what does your coffee hit all these check boxes, and you want to have all of them to be that way. In my old office in LaGrange, Illinois, we actually had our own coffee. We had a company that private labeled it for us. And it was one of those things where we knew where the sourcing came from and it checked off all the boxes that we wanted. And we tried to make it we made it affordable as we could. We didn't really make money off the coffee. I mean, it was like $1.50, maybe most. But the whole purpose was to just give our patients an opportunity to have really good quality, high quality coffee at a good, reasonable price compared to what they charge nowadays, which is like $24 to $30 for 12 ounces. We'll get into all that. So the first one that I've been saying for many, many years, probably for the last 17 years, probably even longer, is you got to make sure your coffee's organic. Coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed plant crops that they do with pesticides. And so if you don't have organic coffee, you are consuming a soup of pesticides. The residue of these things stick around. And so when you go ahead and roast them and do all that stuff, it has all this synthetic herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, and all these other things to grow the coffee. You don't want any of that stuff. It's not good for you. Pesticides alone are carcinogenic. They cause cancer in many different things, many different ways, depending on what pesticide they're using and so forth. But my rule of thumb I tell people is, if you're going to spray something that kills insects, there's a good chance that kills you too, or kills something of you. And so if we get pesticides in our gut, that's not good. It kills a lot of our good, healthy gut microbiome, the virome, all these other things. And we want to make sure that we're keeping that as healthy as we can. So you want to make sure your coffee's organic. Okay. Now, for most people, that's going to knock out all your coffee shops. I think there's a very few select coffee shops that do offer organic coffee. I remember living back home near the suburbs of Chicago. We had a couple options. Where I'm at in Knoxville, there is at least one, maybe two options that I have when I go out for coffee. I know I can get the drip, or if I want a latte, I know it's going to be organic. So that's the first thing. The second thing, this came by through Bulletproof Coffee, Dave Asprey's company. He's the one that kind of really exposed out mold-free coffee. And he has all these things about mycotoxins in coffee, what they are, the molds and the mycotoxins. This cause havoc on our health, our immune system, and so much more. Now, some people will say the roasting process kills the mold, but there have been studies to show that it doesn't. And so depending, and I'm going to go through all the check boxes here, that's going to help you understand how to minimize the mold even more. So let's say you're like, I don't want to spend, because most of these companies, when you do a mold-free, mycotoxin-free coffee, you want to make sure it's third-party verified. You don't want them doing that because they may not be as critical on their product, but a third party will. But the other thing about that is a lot of these coffees are going to go for $24 to $30 for 12 ounces. That's pretty, in my opinion, it's steep. That's what the market is. That's how they define the market. People pay for it. The companies all agree, and they hit right around that price point. Very few companies, I haven't seen it yet, that are third-party verified that are cheaper than that. But there are things that you can do to help improve the quality of your coffee, make sure it's the least amount of mold possible if you don't want third-party verified mold free. We're going to get into that. So one of the things that is you want to make sure there's a processing of how coffee's processed. So there is the dry, sun-dry process, and then there's a wet hulled or wet processed or washed coffee. And so a lot of people more prefer a wet washed type of a coffee. It's going to be a little bit more expensive because you're using water to run everything in there. Rather the sun dry, they just throw those beans out in the sun and let it dry out, and then they'll go ahead and go to the roasting. They wash the beans really, really well. And what research has shown in that it can actually lower the risk of mold contamination. You can get some of that stuff off the beans, and that's going to lower your chances, okay? That's a big thing there. So you always want to look for wet wash, wet hulled, washed, they call it in quotations, coffee is going to be very beneficial for you to make sure that your coffee is that. Like I said, this is going to be a little bit pricier because it's easier to just take the beans, throw them on there, let them dry, and that's it. These they wash, they have to work them, and they have to spread them out real evenly and nice so they can dry very, very well. There's going to be other things that you want to look at, though. One of these things, I went through this probably about 10 years ago, and I was trying to understand the difference between different roasts. And what does that all mean? Like, what's the acidic level, antioxidant level? There's coffees out there now, they'll say we have a higher antioxidant level compared to other ones based on their roasting process. And there's research to show if you roast in a certain temperature, you can maximize the antioxidant levels of coffee. It's very cool how the science has come around with a lot of this. And so it's one of those things that I love to, sorry, my camera moved. We look at things that are going to be light roast to medium roast are usually the best. They're going to have the highest level of compounds, antioxidants, polyphenols, all these good stuff that you find in coffee that are really, really good for us. Again, if you want me to do a podcast on the benefits of coffee, like I said, just email me and say coffee, and I will be and you can find my email in the show notes. I'll be more than happy to do one. There's a ton of benefits, but so a light or medium roast are usually really, really good to do that. Dark roast isn't. The darker the bean, the more the oil comes, the more the burn kind of effect happens. You have some people say it's more of a higher chance of carcinogenic effects. I think it's called the amylchloride or something like that, which is carcinogenic. So you want to make sure that you don't do the dark roast, the French roast, the dark roast in any way, those shape or form. Light to medium is the sweet spot. I mostly do all the time medium. I don't do dark. It's mostly medium. I've never really done light, to be honest. I always thought light wasn't that good. Up until about a few years ago, I actually found out that is not true. And so I haven't really found a brand yet that does light that I'm interested in. But I know I'm going to be doing that in the next few months here just to see flavor profile, quality, and all those things. So you want to make sure light to medium roast is what you're looking at when it comes to that. Freshness. So this is tricky for a lot of people because the longer coffee, from the moment it was roasted to put in the bag, if you go 1 month, that's 20% less chlorophyllogenic acid, which is a huge benefit to the body. So that's only 1 month. So it's about 20% every month. So by the time you look at 5 months, let's say you got this coffee and it was roasted 5 months ago, it's not going to have a lot of good benefits and so forth. They're going to be down. So the key component is fresh as possible. This is why eventually for myself, I told my wife this, that I want to roast my own coffee. Before I was getting ready to move, within the year before, I was actually looking at roasters. What's the best quality home roasting equipment? Because of this, I wanted to be able to roast my coffee and then consume that, break it down and consume it within like a week, and then just roast every week. Didn't happen yet, but it's in my radar for this year to get that and do just that. Because I'll tell you, it's actually cheaper to get green bean coffee, raw bean coffee, unroasted coffee is actually a little cheaper, and you get it more in bulk. And so I'm interested in that also. So that's the component. You want to make sure it's as fresh as you possibly can. Great to find someone that's a local that do the roasting right there, because usually they're going to be more fresh and you can get a lot more of the benefits of coffee when it comes to that. Another thing I'm very big on, and it's really great to do, And the biggest reason is mold. Remember, I told you we're going to talk about how to lower your mold content. Single origin is always the best way to go. It's you know where it's at, you know where it's processed. They usually take care of it, and it's usually less chances of having mold contamination in some way, shape, or form. So you can really truly know that it's from this source. This is where it's at. You know they take care of it. That's the coffee I always consume. As single origin. It's what I like to have. I want to know who's doing it. I want to know that it has a lower chance of mold if it's not mold free already, and those kind of things. So some people were saying, now this is interesting. I found when I was doing this research for this podcast, they found that Arabica beans for dark roast, they actually show higher contents of antioxidant levels, which I was like, interesting, because I thought, light to medium was the one you want to go with. But if you get Arabica beans and you do a dark roast are really, if you do have a dark roast and you like that, a French press are really, really good with that. That's what I use them for sometimes. And I do have a little bit of dark roast. I said I don't. I usually do medium roast. That's my main one every single time. But I'll have like a cold brew once a month. I'll do like a French press maybe once every 1 to 2 months, just to change the flavor up a little bit. And we have one that is dark roast. It's a Cuban type of coffee. It's organic and so forth. And I was just like, hey, this is cool. Love the flavor of it. And it's just a little treat I do every once in a while. One of the things that we always had in our coffee was like this, and research has shown that it's really good to lower mold content, is you want to get the high altitude and shade grown. If you get both of those, that really lowers mold content, and it's usually higher quality. Okay, so one of the things we do, when I first found this out like 12 years ago, I was like, okay, great. Who has the highest elevation for creating coffee? And it's Peruvian coffee. It is the highest elevation. And I could be wrong. I haven't done this research in a while. But based on every place I saw where Maine coffee was produced, I saw Peruvian coffee was the highest elevation. What did I realize when I did this is that the Peruvian coffee, that's what we sold at our old office, Peruvian coffee, the one we used to get, had the best robust flavor. I mean, it was just, oh my God, it was unbelievable flavor, great taste. Nothing could beat it. And so this is why high altitude is also good for high quality, having good quality, but it's also good it helps lower the mold potential. And so you're playing the game, right? So if you don't want to pay the extra $12 to $15 for a 12 ounce, compared to normally 10 to 15 is where you're going to find that sweet spot for organic, and all these other things. Wet hold, right? That's number one. You want to make sure it's wet washed, in other words, and so forth. You want to make sure that it's single origin, which lowers mold. You want to make sure it's higher elevation. So those three things are going to help you really look at for mold content per se, to minimize that and try to save, if you want to save a little bit of money. Now, for me, like I said, I don't spend the $24+ so that tells you right off the bat I don't do mold-free coffee. But what I will do is I will choose brands that are based upon either, there's one brand that checks for like over 150 different toxins in their coffee, and they show that they're 100% free, and they're a little bit better in pricing. And there's a couple of companies I choose theirs that's either like really, really high elevation. So Peruvian coffee is one of those. And then there's, I'll choose them because I know they wet wash. They are single origin. It's right here, Peru. It's the only place that plantation's at. And the other benefit is that it's high elevation. So I know for sure that the mold is at the lowest possible level. And we do medium roast with that coffee. So again, does your Starbucks do this? No. Does a lot of other coffee shops do this? Probably not. So you want to make sure that the lowest standard, I would say, for you is organic coffee. So if you're looking at what you want to save and what you want to do organic. That would be the best one for you. You get all the pesticide stuff out, no pesticide pool in your coffee, none of that stuff. So you know that you're at least doing that. Then you can go to the second layer, which is, okay, well, hey, I like organic. I'm already doing that. What can I do later? Now look at the companies that you buy your organic coffee from and see, do they wet wash? It's a single origin and it's in a high elevation, right? So then you can, if you don't know some of these things, reach out to the company and ask. They'll be more than happy to share that with you. And then if you're like, hey, I like that, but I want to go the best of the best, then there's third-party coffees. And so third-party verified mold-free coffee, okay? I'm going to do, in the notes, I will share with you the different brands that you can choose from that are already doing that for the mold-free. A lot of people ask for that one. I'm also going to share the other one with you that's about almost 50% cheaper. And it checks for over 150 different toxins that can be in the coffee on there or so forth. They'll show you that it's not, and it's organic. So I'll at least give you those two. And then I'll also share a couple other brands that I like, that I utilize, that are mold free, not as expensive, but they're still up there in price. So I'm going to give you the variables. Check them out in the show notes. I'll have a list down there and links for you to look at all those. If you made it this far in the podcast, I said I was going to share one thing with you to know if you should be able to drink coffee or not. So this process is real simple. All it does is looking at how your adrenals respond to the caffeine response that you're having when you go ahead and consume it. And so what you can do is you can prick your finger and look at your blood sugar levels. And from there, you can look and see, okay, what's my sugar level at? Let's say it's at 100. All right, I'm going to have coffee now. So you have coffee. You wait 30 minutes later, retest your blood sugar level. If it goes up 10% or more, coffee is not good for you right now. It is stressing your nervous system too much, and it's not allowed. So you're getting a sugar increase. Now, this is black coffee. This has no cream in it. It has no sugar. It's just black coffee. You want to test it that way. Okay. Now, for some people who go, I don't like black coffee, it's bitter and this, well, let me give you an extra bonus on top of that. My wife just got me onto this a few months ago, and I'm blown away by this. If you don't like the bitterness of coffee, put a touch of salt in your coffee. You will thank me later. My lattes have never been better. Sometimes I drink black coffee, and I don't mind it at all. I didn't mind it anyhow, but it just adds a nice flavor to it. And you want a good quality sea salt. I'll share in the show notes what my sea salt that I use, that I love. I put it in my water. Cook it with my food. I put it in my coffee, and so much more. So check that out. If you have any questions on this, let me know. And if you want me to talk about all the benefits to inspire you to want to drink some coffee, I can do that. And I can also get into the topics of alternatives that you can do for coffee that are, there can be different teas. There can be stuff that tastes like coffee, but isn't coffee, no caffeine. Or I can put a podcast together. So just let me know. I want to thank you again for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, like, share a review. It really helps us get this podcast up and out there and exposed. And I look forward to talking to you guys all next week. Until next time, keep rocking and rolling.